When I was a young boy, my father took me into the city to see a marching band. He said, son, when you grow up, would you be the savior of the broken, the beaten, and the damned? He said, will you defeat them, your demons, and all the non-believers, the plans that they have made? Because one day I'll leave you a phantom to lead you in the summer to join the Black Parade.
Welcome back to the Cork Football Podcast. This week we're going to continue our look back series, and with the upcoming league game between Cork and Meath in Páirc Uí Rinn, we're going to do a deep dive back into the bitter battles of the late 1980s. Before I begin, look, I just ask you to, if you're on Twitter, to follow me on Twitter, and you'll get all the updates of anything that's happening. And just, if you like the video, like it on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. Look, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look back at the rivalry and how it emerged and why it became so bitter. And I'm just going to examine if we could be in for a second installment in the coming years. At the moment, I suppose what both counties that were kind of emerging from a bit of a wilderness, they're coming out from the shadow of Dublin, and we're really on the shadow of Kerry at the moment. And I suppose there's a kind of a shared trauma between the two counties. We kind of understand what it's like to play a second fiddle to a dominant power. And, if we do happen to break out from that dominance, it'll be, God help whoever will stand in our way, and it could very well be Meath for us and Cork for them. So, and look, I suppose both of our recoveries, we're developing big, strong squads, big athletic players, abrasive type of players. We're down in Division 2, and look, we met in the first round of the round robin there last year, but it was a game that both counties were prepared to lose. It wasn't do or die. We've had a few league games there over the last couple of years as well, but not high stakes. But I think that Sunday's league game could be the first real battle for supremacy. It's probably going to decide who is likely to get promotion up to Division 1. And that's going to be a vital stepping stone for both counties, for a credible push towards being in contention for Sam Maguire. So there's going to be a lot at stake on Sunday. So you'd never know. It could all kick off down in Páirc Uí Rinn. So, and all those old bitternesses and wounds, they could resurface very fast. Just quote there from the physicist John Tyndall. He said, "Old factions are like volcanoes. They may be nearly extinct, but they are never quite so, and very little matter stokes the fire again." And it's actually, my daughter there, she was at the Cork and Tip hurling game, and she came home and she said, "Dad, I really think I'm starting to hate Tip." And I reminded her, I said, which was only a few years ago, we were shouting for them, and they were stopping Kilkenny's 5 in a row. And I was telling her about the bitterness of the 1990s, and Babs Keating's Donkeys Don't Win Derbies, and the crowd jostling Ger Cunningham behind the goal in the 91 replay. And to top it off, they knew that paragon of integrity, Michael Lowry, telling us that nothing was after happening on the television after. And it's gas how that when the stakes become high and there's a battle for sustained supremacy, that generational memory kind of kicks into gear very fast. So just looking back at the 80s rivalry in general, um, it was a rivalry that kind of transcended sport. It was nearly a national story at the time, a real clash of cultures. You had Meath; they were the hard, uncompromising, direct team. They had loads of kind of no nonsense, hard men, enforcers, Mick Lyons, Liam Harn, and Jerry McEntee and them boys. But then to balance that, you had very stylish, classy players up front. Um, they were Colin O'Rourke, Bernard Flynn, Brian Stafford, really efficient players. They didn't need an awful lot of possession, and they could really hurt you. Um, then Cork brought this kind of they had a kind of a colour and style, and they had this kind of carefree innocence with Larry and Dave Barry, John O'Driscoll. They'd turn up thinking that they could go kind of toe to toe with you on footballing terms and let the best team win. But that carefree innocence was very short lived, especially after the 88 drawn game. We had to really reach deep into the darker corners of our souls, like to compete with Meath after that. So it all began in 1987. We eventually toppled Kerry just about, and after looking back at the previous few years there in the last video, we should probably have taken Kerry down a year earlier. We had the players, but I don't know, we just didn't do it. Billy Morgan came in '87 with Tompkins and Fahey as well, and they were big additions, obviously. Meath had beaten Dublin in '86, and they were very unlucky in the against Kerry in the semi-final. A couple of their players, defenders, collided, and the ball broke easily to Kerry forward, and they got a handy goal. Sure, what's new, and that experience it did stand to Meath the following year. But even despite all that, we really started well in the '87 final. We were really flowing, and we led 7-2 there in the middle of the first half. Meath were going very direct, but our backs were really handling it very comfortably. And there was a turning point came then in the middle of the first half. Teddy McCarthy won an unbelievable kick out, and he put Jimmy Kerrigan through. And Kerrigan, he had a man on his left and a man on his right, but he decided to shoot. And Mick Lyons came out and smothered the ball, and that was a big turning point. Not long after that, we Colin O'Rourke went down the field and he got a great point, long range point, and then we lost the ball very cheaply around the middle of the field. David Beggy went on a run past O'Rourke. O'Rourke had a go, and Karen saved the first effort, but the ball broke, and we were kind of ball watching in defence, and me got the goal. Look, that day, David Beggy was the player that time. He was on fire that day, and Colin Corrigan, and he got injured just coming up to half time, and he was a huge loss. He would have been a leader in defence that time with Conor Coonahan, and look, we stayed in touch all right in the second half, but we just couldn't get the lead back or even to level. There was a real turning point came in the second half. Conor Hoonan, he caught Joe Castles with a fair shoulder, but 30 yards from the Meath goal, and ball broke. Cork got a free, and Larry had a go to level it up, but a very weak effort into the goalkeeper's hands, and Meath went straight down the field and got a point, and that put them 2 up. And that was kind of the pattern of the second half. We'd miss, they'd go down and score, and it eventually ended up 114 to 11 points. A bit of aggro, right, in the second half of that game. Billy Morgan actually got a 4-month suspension. He had a bit of a run-in with a Meath player. And so that was 87. We were disappointed after it, but look, we weren't despondent. It was our first kind of go at being in a final, and we thought that we'd be better equipped for 88. We beat Kerry down at Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Hard fought enough game. We only won that by a point. That was the day that Conor Coonahan gave Jack O'Shea the very thorough physical examination. We had Dave Barry and Denny Allen were after returning to the panel, and they added fierce experience as well and skill. Paul McGrath and Stephen O'Brien, they were after coming in. They were good players. Stephen O'Brien was only a few days over age for minor actually at the time. But so that was the summer of '88. We That was a big there was big sporting buzz around at the time. The Irish soccer team, they were after getting to the Euro finals in Germany, and there was fierce appetite for anything sporting after that. Our hurlers were well beaten in the Munster final by Tip, so the footballers were the only show in town, and another cut off Meath was fitting the bill perfectly. And that was also the summer of Michael Jackson down in Parky Keeve, and there was fierce excitement around that. And little did we know that there was going to be another smooth criminal dressed in black that was going to be around. We were going to get to know him before the end of the end of September. So that was the summer of '88. We went on in, and we met Monaghan in the semi final, and we it was all teed up. We met Meath, and look, like the previous year, we started well. Teddy McCarthy got a goal, and we went 5 up, fairly early on. But the game was very, very nasty. Lot of late tackles, and Meath ground their way back into the game by the end of the first half, and they were actually leading by a point by half time. Second half was kind of nip and tuck. But we were the better team, and we were 3 points up with 10 minutes to go. And Meath, being Meath, they ground it down and they levelled it, and we won a free with 55 yards out, about a minute to go, and Larry went to take it, and I'll never forget Ger Canning's commentary. We must have played it 1,000 times at home, and it went, he's just blessed himself. Will the gods smile favourably upon his plea? And they did, and Larry nailed it. And there was only seconds on the clock, and we won the kick out, but we lost the ball very cheaply over by the sideline. And that time, the sidelines that were taken from the ground. And I'll always remember Martin O'Connell, he take it a high ball into the square, and there was a man interviewed after outside, and a fairly disgruntled Corkman. I'd say he was from back to Hollow direction by the accent, and he put it. He said, "The ball fell loose around the house, as we call it down our way," and I remember Dave Biggie. He broke onto the ball. He didn't quite get control of it, and as it was kind of going away from him, he kind of threw himself on the ground, and our old buddy from the kingdom, Tommy Sugru, was only too happy to oblige with the whistle. And the sickening thing about that was that the same fella, he was on television a couple of months later below in Killarney at the Munster final. He jumping around the stand after Kerry getting a goal, and he had refereed us, and he the previous September. Like, do we ever learn? And another thing actually is Tony Davis gave an interview after that game, and it was a very kind of conciliatory interview. He was kind of saying, look, sure, them things happen in sport and all that. But I remember in our house at home, if anyone was ever getting a bit of a scolding, or they were in any bit of trouble, someone would pipe up with in their best Tony Davis impersonation. They'd say, sure, those things will always happen, and to diffuse the situation. But there was 3 weeks between the interval, or there was 3 week interval between the drawn game and the replay, and things were fairly leisurely back then, all right. So, but watching back that replay, and what it really reminded me of was the '09 final against Kerry. It was kind of death by 1,000 cuts, and Meath realised like that it was, they just had to take it down to the ground, and like Kerry in '09, and they knew that if they went out and played ball, like they weren't likely to win, and they turned it into a real dogfight, and it was, Meath they were filthy the same day. McEntee was sent off early on, and but we couldn't take advantage of it. We didn't stand back either, I suppose, but we weren't really, we weren't going out to do it, and we were only reacting, and it didn't, it was a kind of a slow strangulation, really. We were never more than 2 or 3 points behind, but never really looked like winning it. We had loads of possession. We were very wasteful, and towards the end, then we panicked. We started shooting very fierce, wild shots, and it just wasn't to be. There was a fierce cloak of depression around after that. The following few weeks, we took it very badly. like the frustration of underperforming. We knew there was way more in that team, and getting bullied in, and to put the tin hat in it. In you had that Kerry so and so, and reffing, and you know, it was we were in a bad way. And after that, actually, which would have been a fairly exceptional thing at the time, that the GA president, he criticised the tactics employed in the final, and the Meath players weren't too happy about that, and they refused to accept their medals from him, a few of them. And the other thing about it as well, I remember we were in the Canal End for that replay, and it was the first time that I had ever experienced any kind of venom like that on the stands. It was very nasty. Like I'd been a young fella at the time, but it was nasty. Larry was getting desperate abuse altogether. Right, look, he had transferred from Kildare, but look, that wasn't a capital crime or anything like. But he and he was assaulted in the field, going off the field by a Meath supporter after the match, which that left a very bad taste as well. But anyway, look, we moved on, and we met Kerry in the 89 Munster final in Killarney. Look, we beat them well the same day. It was look, we were really on top of Kerry at that stage, and everyone was kind of looking forward to we were going to be meeting Meath in the semi-final, but it was Dublin put paid to that, and they beat Meath. And Dublin, I suppose they thought that they could just do a bit of a copy and paste from Meath's tactics, and Cork would kind of do their usual thing. And they had a man sent off. They conceded 2 penalties, kind of very bad-tempered, scrappy affair, and very wet day. And I remember RT did a kind of a montage after of all the shenanigans, and they had a track playing by Salt and Pepper, Push It, and that was another well-worn video in our house. So, look, we got the monkey off our backs anyway against Mayo, and we had a few hairy moments all right in that game, but look, we got it done. But we knew that unless we beat Meath, we really hadn't arrived. And Liam Hayes, he was writing in what paper he was in that time, but he called it a Mickey Mouse All Ireland. Colin O'Rourke, in fairness, he put it a bit more eloquently, and he said Cork are the best of the rest, but they haven't beaten us, and until you beat the man who holds the ground, you're just a tenant. And there was real deep-seated animus after building between the two sets of players at the time. They were coincidentally, they holidayed in the same resort, whoever organised that, but there was no mixing or communication between the players. So we met Meath in the league semi-final in the spring of 1990, and that was a very bad-tempered affair again. So it was, we went on, and we played Kerry in the Munster final that year. Excuse me, and we won that by 15 points, played well that day, and that was actually the day after Ireland played Italy in the World Cup quarter-final when Scalacci got that goal, and as a dear late neighbour of ours called him the fellow with the eyes. And speaking of Scalacci, it's gas how nicknames stick to people. I was training our under 14s there about, I suppose, 10 years ago, and there was a young fella, and out of nowhere he had found a real goal scoring touch, and we were training one night, and he was at to score a couple of goals, and I said, "Gee, Tomas," I said, "you're like Scalacci," I said, and the lads, young fella, hadn't a clue who I was on about, so I had to explain who Scalacci was, and by God, if I did, and they still calling him Scalacci today. But the hurlers, they beat Tip surprisingly in the Munster final that year, and there was a fierce buzz around you the afterglow of the World Cup, and the double was on, and the footballers, we met Roscommon in the semi-final, and it was on to the final against Meath, and look, it was just about. It was going to be written in the stars that it was going to be Meath, and we were going to renew battle with them. And I remember Billy Morgan said he said that he actually prayed that we'd meet Meath in the final. And I remember the tension coming up to that game. It was very, there was a lot of worry actually, like that they were going to beat us again. and it was just something we couldn't countenance. And to lose the double, the footballers not hold up their end and get beaten by Meath again, it was just something. It was something we just couldn't countenance. Um, and I think Morgan knew that as well, and he didn't. He knew that it wasn't going to be go about out and playing ball. We wasn't going to be about skill. We had to go down into the deeper, darker corners again, and the dark arts, and we did that the psychological hardness of Meath. And I suppose, as the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche put it, he said, "He who fights with monsters might take care lest he become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into the abyss gazes back into you." And look, I suppose the final itself was played on the 16th of September. We all remember Colm O'Neill got sent off early, but I think that kind of galvanised us. We weren't going to lose that game, and Fahey and Collett, they dominated midfield that day. Fahey got 4 points. The two wing backs played very well, Mick Slocum and Barry Coffey. The game itself was very tense and dour. Look, we didn't care. We just wanted to get it done, and there was no real highlight in that game. There was a kind of a turning point early in the second half. Brian Stafford got through, and John Kearns had a great save, and that kind of kept us. We were going to do it after that. We were never led in that match. We won at 11 points to 9, very low scoring game. But look, there was a huge sense of relief. Yeah, we'd done the double, but it was it was very similar actually to the feeling when we beat down in 2010. It wasn't, performance really didn't matter. It was just about, having the cup at the end. And look, as the Meath midfielder Liam Hayes described it after, he said there was a genuine, deep-seated dislike between the two groups. We didn't just want to beat them; we wanted to break them once and for all. And I think that would have really broken the legacy of that team. That game kind of bookended that saga. We didn't get back the following year, and there was never really a finality to that kind of that era. Both squads, they were in their twilight, and it's an itch we never really got to scratch. Kind of the final showdown. It's I suppose no one really could say that they came out on top, and the bitterness was, it did remain. But look, it was soothed somewhat in 2001. We lost John Kearns, and in fairness to the Meath players, they came down, and he was an iconic figure from them battles, and they came down, and the two sets of players mourned together. And as Ernest Hemingway put it, when he was talking about the brotherhood of rivals, he said, "In spite of all the rivalries and hatreds, it's the closest brotherhood there is." Now, after that, the two counties, their paths kind of diverged. Meath, in fairness to them, they stayed going. Boylan, he built nearly a brand new squad. He built it around players like Trevor Giles and Graham Garrity and John McDermott. They contested 4 All-Irelands in the 1990s and won 2. Look, you had Kerry and the Ulster teams were coming back into that time as well. And so we didn't really kick on at all. We squandered. We had underage success, plenty of it in those years, but we didn't make much use of it. We got to 2 All-Ireland finals in '93 and '99, but we lost both of them. We really didn't do anything in the '90s. We had a bit of a skirmish, all right, with Meath in the '99 final, but and again, we kind of reverted to type. We underperformed, and Meath won the vital moments. We met again in 2007 semi-final. We won handy that day. But look, neither of them two were kind of full-scale battles. We knew it was kind of one-offs, and there wasn't really anything. The past really didn't matter. But look, I suppose we won our All-Ireland all right in 2010, and Meath were gone into decline all right at that stage. The 2010s were poor for both counties. Dublin they were hammering Meath there regularly, and Kerry were on top of us. And But now, look, we're seeing a bit of a kind of a symmetrical recovery. We've had kind of sporadic underage wins there in the past 10 years, and they're providing the nucleus of the players in both squads. And, you've a bit of experience still from the kind of the Barn years, Donald Keoghan there with Meath and Ian Maguire with Cork. And I suppose another parallel with both squads, excuse me, they were developing these big athletic players, aggressive, abrasive players. And, if we start to come in each other's way, it could become a real tinderbox if in a high stakes game. Look, the rivalry may be dormant, but it could kick off again and become a contemporary saga. You'd never know. And there's something in the stars about Cork and Meath. Our fortunes, they often kind of loosely mirror each other. We met in the All Ireland final in 1967, and when we're weak, they're weak, and we both kind of have suffered in the shadows of a kind of a neighbouring superpower. And maybe we just need each other as a kind of a dark mirror to hold up to one another, and to bring the best out in ourselves. So you never know. We could be in for a couple of years of it. To be great. So look, I leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed it. And look, I'll just say again, follow me on Twitter and like the video on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. So look, I'll leave it there, and good night and God bless. Thanks.